drums, one shape, two words of sound. This is the darbuka, a goblet drum at the heart of Tunisian folk music. But the drum you hear first and the drum you hear second, they do not simply sound different. They mean different things. I am Ali Chamseddine from the High Institute of Art and Crafts, University of Gebes, Tunisia. Today, I want to take you into a story of sonic transformation, one where the shift from clay to metal in a single instrument reveals deep questions about how timbre carries cultural meaning, how materiality shapes perception, and how tradition adapts without disappearing. Since the turn of the 21st century, timbre has emerged as a central research topic across music disciplines, as scholars like Jason Winikoff have documented. But much of this work has focused on what I would call extraordinary, the virtuoso vocal techniques of tuba, the complex orchestration of Western art music, the extreme sonorities of experimental genres. My research takes a different path. I look at the ordinary, the everyday, a drum you would find in a neighborhood celebration, in a mezoued ensemble, in the hands of a hobby musician. And within this ordinary object, I find something quite extraordinary. A sonic negotiation between heritage and modernity encoded in timbre itself. The question that drives this presentation is simple. When a traditional earthenware darbuka is replaced by its modern metal counterpart, what happens to its timbre? And more importantly, what does that timbre shift mean for the people who play it, hear it, and live with it? Let me begin by introducing the two instruments at the center of this study. One on the left, a traditional earthenware darbuka, handcrafted from local clay, fired in a kiln fitted with a natural animal skin membrane. It is fragile, sensitive to temperature and humidity, and irreplaceable in context of rural music heritage. On the right, a modern metal darbuka, typically cast in aluminum or steel, fitted with a synthetic plastic membrane. It is durable, consistent, easily tunable, and designed for the demands of amplified performance and studio recording. Both produce three canonical articulations: the dum, the tek, and the tak. But as we will hear, the same name does not mean the same sound. To compare these instruments rigorously, I designed a controlled laboratory protocol. Each darbuka was recorded in the same acoustically treated environment, using a calibrated Audio-Technica AT4033 condenser microphone at 48 kHz 24-bit resolution. 10 discrete samples per articulation per instrument were recorded by expert percussionists, musicians deeply rooted in the Tunisian folk tradition. This answered that differences in timbre could be attributed to the instruments themselves, not a variation in technique. The analysis proceeds along two parallel tracks, acoustic and cultural, reflecting what Stephen Field calls acoustomology, the idea that sound is both a physical phenomenon and a way of knowing the world. On the acoustic track, fast Fourier transform analysis using PRAT, measuring frequency spectra, harmonic structure, pitch, stability, and temporal decay. All between condition comparisons were subjected to paired samples t-tests or Wilcoxon-signed drag tests where data deviated from normality. On the culture track, ethnomusicological fieldwork examining how performers and listeners describe and value these timbre differences in everyday language. Terms like warm, bright, ancestral, and modern. This dual approach allows us to bridge what too often remain separate, measurable acoustics and lived musical experience. Let's begin with the doom, the foundational stroke of darbuka playing. On the earthenware drum, the doom produces a prominent low-frequency peak centered around 108 Hz, with a broad spectral envelope extending up to 5 kHz. The sound is warm, resonant, and carries a perceptible noise floor in the upper spectrum. This is what performers in Tunisia describe as warmth, depth, and earthiness. On the metal drum, the picture changes dramatically. The fundamental frequency shifts upward to approximately 688 Hz. The low frequency energy is significantly reduced. Instead, we see a more focused spectral profile in the mid to high range. The sound is brighter, more articulate, and crucially more easily projected in amplified context. The difference is statistically significant. T9 equal 4.21, P equal 0.002. The tag is the sharp, edge track articulation, the punctuation of the darbuka rhythm. Here the differences are more subtle but equally telling. On the earthenware drum, the tag peaks around 699 Hz with an irregular noise-dominated spectral envelope. The decay is very short, approximately 45 milliseconds, and the sound is dominated by transient attack with minimal harmonic resonance. On the metal drum, the tag shifts to around 1 kHz. The spectral envelope becomes notably more regular, with partial spacing of approximately 250 Hz, confirming a stronger tonal character. The decay extends to about 60 milliseconds, and the harmonic projection is enhanced, making the tag more audible in ensemble settings. In the language of Tunisian performers, the metal tag is described as clean, sharp, cutting through the mix. The tuck is perhaps the most revealing articulation, a hybrid stroke that bridges the tonal depth of the doom and the percussive sharpness of the tag. It is produced by striking with a moderately open palm and controlled release. On the earthenware drum, the tuck articulation shows greater spectral irregularity than the doom, with a mixed tonal noisy profile. The decay is moderate, around 180 milliseconds, but with perceptible spectral drift. The centroid shifts downward toward lower frequencies as the sound fades. This spectral drift is what performers associate with the organic character of clay. On the metal drum, the tuck displays the highest spectral regularity of all articulations. Partial spacing stabilizes around 350 Hz intervals, and the decay extends to approximately 220 milliseconds, about 22% longer than the earthenware counterpart, a difference that proved statistically significant, P equal 0.021. Most strikingly, the spectral centroid shifts upward during decay, stabilizing in the mid-range around 1 kHz. This gives the metal tuck a sustained projective quality that the earthenware version simply cannot achieve. This is the Timbral signature of modernity: longer sustain, clear pitch, greater projection. To summarize, the earthenware darbuka emphasizes low-frequency energy and irregular spectral envelopes, quality described as warm, earthy, and ancestral. The metal darbuka emphasizes mid to high frequency regularity and extended sustain, qualities described as bright, clean, and modern. These differences are not marginal. They are statistically robust, perceptually salient, and, as we will now explore, culturally significant. But these acoustic differences are not merely technical. They are embedded in cultural logics in what we might call, following Stephen Field, an acoustomology of place. The earthenware darbuka does not simply produce warm timbre. Its warmth is inseparable from the material conditions of its making, the local clay, the hand molding process, the kiln firing, the sensitivity to humidity and temperature. This material properties index a rural heritage, a relationship with the land, a slower mode of production. When a performer strikes this drum, the sound they hear is the sound of that world, fragile, intimate, and rooted. The metal darbuka, by contrast, indexes an urban performer psychology. Its aluminum body and synthetic membrane are products of industrial manufacturing, durable, consistent, and transportable. When a performer strikes this drum, the sound they hear is the sound of amplification, of the stage, of the recording studio. It is a sound designed to project, to cut through, to travel. Crucially, the metal darbuka has not replaced the earthenware drum. In Tunisian folk ensembles today, both types coexist, sometimes within the same performance, the same piece, the same ensemble. This is what Simha Aron calls adaptive tradition, innovation that coexists with preservation. In a typical Mezouid concert, you might hear the earthenware darbuka during a slow, intimate rhythm, a section where the warm, resonant timbre supports vocal expression and emotional depth. Then, when the tempo increases and the ensemble builds, the metal darbuka takes over, its brightness and projection cutting through the amplified Mezouid pipes and the rhythmic intensity of the dance. This is not loss of tradition, it is a transformation of it. The two drums negotiate their role through timbre. I want to be precise about something here. The timbre itself does not inherently evoke rural intimacy or ancestral ritual. Rather, the earthenware construction functions as a material index of rural heritage, and its resulting acoustic signature serves as a notable marker of that context. This distinction matters because it decouples the acoustic phenomenon from the cultural meaning, while preserving their interdependence. The warmth of the earthenware dome is measurable. It is the concentration of energy below 500 Hz. The irregular spectral envelope, the rapid decay. But the warmth that performers and listeners feel, that is a cultural construction, built on years of listening, playing, and living with this instrument in specific social contexts. What I am proposing is a model of culturally grounded timbre analysis, one that links measurable acoustic features, harmonic regularity, spectral centroid shift decay envelope to performance practice and social context without reducing one to the other. What does the darbuka case tell us about timbre more broadly? First, it challenges the assumption that timbre studies should focus primarily on pitched instruments or vocal production. Percussion, especially Northwestern percussion, offers some of the richest timbral vocabularies in the world's music. Yet, these traditions are often marginalized in timbre research, which has historically been shaped by Western art music paradigms. Second, it shows that Timbre transformation is not a modern or Western phenomenon. The shift from clay to metal in the darbuka is part of a much longer history of material experimentation in North African musical practice. A history that includes the introduction of synthetic membranes, the modification of drum body shapes, and the adaptation of playing techniques to new sonic possibilities. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates that timbre is never just about sound. It is always about the material conditions that produce the sound, the culture contexts that give it meaning, and the social practices that sustain or transform. In his presentation at this very conference, Jason Winikoff called for a shift in timbre scholarship, away from the extraordinary and toward ordinary. He asked, why do we study the virtuoso's tone but not the amateurs? Why do we analyze the composer's orchestration but not the bedroom guitarist's amplified strum? The darbuka study is, in a sense, an answer to that call. The earthenware and metal darbukas are not exceptional instruments. They are not played by virtuoso solists on the world's great stages, at least not primarily. They are played by folk musicians, by hobbyists, by performers at weddings and celebrations and community gatherings. They are, in Winikoff's words, the timbre of cultures. The sounds that most people in a given society hear, feel, and recognize as theirs. And yet, within the ordinary timbres lies an extraordinary richness, a sonic negotiation between heritage and modernity, between the earth and the factory, between the intimate and the projective, between the ancestral and the contemporary. If timbre scholarship is to be truly global, if it is to encompass the full diversity of the world's musical practices, then it must take these ordinary timbres seriously, not as curiosities, not as footnotes, but as a central sites of musical meaning-making. Let me close by returning to the three articulations that structure this study. The doom, low-frequency warmth on the earthenware, mid-frequency brightness on metal, the sound of earth transforming into industry. The tag, noise-dominated attack on earthenware, harmonically regular articulation on metal, the sound of tradition sharpening into modernity. The tak, spectral drift on the earthenware, sustained stability on metal, the sound of heritage in dialogue with innovation. These are not just acoustic categories, they are cultural categories, timbral markers of a society in transition. Timbre is not what sound is, timbre is what sound means. Timbre is not just a parameter of sound, it is a carrier of meaning, of history, of a place, of identity. The darbuka teaches us that when materiality changes, timbre changes, and when timbre changes, culture changes with it. But culture does not disappear. It adapts, it negotiates, it finds new ways to speak through old sounds. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.